Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this new class beginning today, week number 1. And today, this class is called Christian Worship, and it deals with the worship of Christians. And begin with introducing myself, the instructor, who's going to lead and teach this 10-week class on Christian worship. So before we go into actual syllabus and introduction to the subject, I'll just let you know who. Good morning, welcome. Okay. Who's been here for the last classes? This is not new, but there are those who are new, so I'll just go over briefly about who I am and what I am qualified to teach this particular lesson and class. Okay, my name is Hwang, and in Chinese it writes like that. Hwang, it means basically yellow, and in Chinese culture it's a very prestigious color. And Song, it means holy or holiness, and Su, it means excellent or outstanding. So that's the name my grandfather gave me, and he was one of those early Christians in Korean history. And he came from the North Korea during the war, Korean War. Okay, so he's been serving as an elder in a church until he was called by God. So he gave me that Christian name. Okay, just a little background about myself. I was born in South Korea, and moved to Central African Republic, which is right in the middle of the African continent. Lived there for like 5 years. That was when I was in high school. And because due to the limitation in language, even though I learned the language English for like 5 years before I go to there, our English classes mainly it's about written English and grammar. So to have a skill for listening and speaking, it took a while. So they placed me in a senior or junior high, which goes back like 3 years back from where I was. So started over and came back to Korea and entered Yonsei University. Then studied, finished, and worked in Korea University Christian Fellowship for like 10 years. Before I moved to U.S. So there I have some intercultural experiences, and indeed the church I had attended is the pastor was an American Baptist missionary, and so basically the service was in English, and then his wife is a Korean and she translated. So it's a bilingual kind of situation, and that's where I had aptitude for more further intercultural or Korean American experience there. Credentials. This qualifies me to teach some of these classes that I am teaching in this Lordland College. I do have a PhD in international development from William Carey International University, which is one of the oldest Christian university in Southern California. And I did a PhD study in leadership with Dr. Robert Clinton and at the Fuller Theological Seminary. And also had an MDiv from Golden Gate Theological Seminary, which now is changed the name to Gateway Theological Seminary. They're in Ontario, moved back to Ontario from the Golden Gate in San Francisco. So that's my Master of Divinity, and I prior to that did an MA, Master of Arts in Missiology from Fuller and Acts as a joint degree. And then I did a BA in English in Yonsei University, one of the best universities in Korea. K, ministries. Primarily, my work was started as a university staff in Korea. And that's where I was trained for the evangelical, biblical-based, Bible-based faith, and had some experience about what the Christian ministry is about. Then also, when I came to Korea, I served in InterServe USA Korean diaspora for many years, and also joined the Center for Business as Mission. Then also I'm still working as a hospice chaplain. And my work in America for last 30 years or so is mainly focused on 1.5 and second generation young people. So my calling as a Christian pastor is younger people, and I'm still working in a Korean community church in Buena Park, and working with still 1.5 second generation young people. So that's my ministry, my calling. The spirituality is a kind of a color of how your faith, your Christianity. And everyone has different colors and sizes and shape. So that's how we are, because God created us to be in a different color and different shape and different size. And that's called diversity. And we, as a believer, are required or demanded to have a tolerance within the allowed limitation of biblical boundary. So I assume your spirituality is not the same as mine. So I'm not saying that you have to follow my spirituality or need to be. I'm not saying that. And I'm just introducing who I am, and you should have a different spirituality. I'm a biblical or evangelical Christian. Basically, that's who I am. So my belief, as long as those major issues are concerned, and also those minor issues in Christian faith is concerned, is based on the Bible. If Bible says this, and I believe this. If Bible says that, I believe that. And those things that Bible does not mention, it's open to your own decision. That's how I position myself when I say biblical. Then I'm a Baptist. And also ordained Baptist minister, Southern Baptist, to be more particular. And I was baptized twice for the reason of becoming a Baptist. And I rather follow emotional versus intellectual spirituality. Mine is more of intellectual spirituality. And I try to be moderate in most of the issues, meaning I do acknowledge difference in opinion in the areas that Bible allows to be diverse. So that's my position, and I'm a born-again Christian, and I'm a diaspora Christian. Diaspora Christians are different from those Christians who are living in his or her own culture of birth. The Bible does differentiate diaspora believers to the regular local or indigenous believers. So that's a very sharp kind of intended distinction in the Bible. That's how I see the biblical diaspora. So you guys all coming from a different countries and different cultures, I consider you also to be a diaspora Christian. We do have a different mandate, and not only the mandate, our existence is different from those who are having just local indigenous existence. So, okay, that being said, let's move to the real subject. Okay, syllabus. Oops. Okay. Those of you who have the workbook that is printed by the school, it is in there. If you don't, just follow this and just take a picture of a couple things from here. Syllabus. The title of the subject is called Christian Worship, and this is for fall quarter 2024, and I'm teaching songs to Professor Hwang. And okay, so course description. This course is designed to provide a biblical framework and understanding for Christian worship by exploring the biblical and theological foundation of worship. So that's a theology and doctrine and the theory of worship. That would be the primary attention that are given in this class. Then also key components in the practice and leadership of worship will be studied. We will examine biblical models and the principle of worship that is God-pleasing and Christ-centered. So we already have some basic philosophy about Christian worship in this particular class. It has to be God-pleasing and Christ-centered. That's biblical. Thus, we should be able to apply them to both corporate worship or congregational worship experience and all of life. Again, when we say worship, it's not worship just limited to Sunday worship or corporate worship, that we come to a church or local church and having certain time and period and having certain orders and having like a praise and a listen to the sermon and having fellowship. That are the basic of what we think of worship, but we want to extend that concept of worship to all of our life. Just like we say the whole life as a believer is a prayer, or prayer is our whole life. So we want to approach the worship in terms of holistic worship, meaning it goes beyond the wall of a local church or the church building. So the worship, the term or a concept will be expanded. Please remember that. That's going to be one of the main philosophy that we are approaching about the worship. So that being said, this course is designed and focused on more of theology or biblical components of or principles of the worship, rather than trying to help you how to design your particular worship, because not many of us are worship leaders in a church, and that subject alone, how to design and perform and evaluate and review and redesign the corporate worship or congregational worship, is another subject. It will be another subject for a whole semester or a whole quarter. So again, I'm clearly clarifying that this particular class is designed to look into the elements of biblical worship. Okay, so that's going to be the focus. So the objectives that after completing or finishing this class, you'll be able to articulate a definition and underlying concepts of worship, and then summarize biblical principles and the values of worship. Then 3, discern worship that pleases God. So that would be the center. 4, design and lead a worship service. Credit requirements and assignments. Just like on any other class that I am offering or I'm teaching, there's a required reading, and the 2 of them, I do not demand you to read both of them, but just one of the book. Choose one of the books. I chose these particular textbooks because you don't have to buy them. Just go online and then you click on it, and then you can download a PDF copy. So those 2, one is praise and worship and becoming worshipers of God, by AI and Joyce Gill. This, even though it's a short one, it does contain all the materials that we need to learn for this class. It's not like a whole thick book, but it does contain the things that we need. Again, another one, the book by Ruth Duck, Worship for the Whole People of God. Again, it says whole people of God, which also the author approaches the subject with the holistic worship, the concept of holistic worship. So you can choose either one of them. Not only you're reading it, you're going to have a book report, which I require you to write a book report on one of the required reading, and please include the main thesis from the reading, stating how the author perceives worship. So you're going to kind of summarize the idea, the thesis or idea of the author about the subject of worship in terms of definition and essence. Then also write your own reflection on how the reading changed your perspectives. I'm not asking whether you agree or disagree. That's another approach of any college or academic writings. you can do like arguments or debate on the thesis. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to write your reflection and how you have changed your perception about the worship to the before you're reading or after you're reading this particular book. So that's the main thing that you want to write on your I would say a term paper. So term paper is about like it should be in college level, or it should be like a 10 pages or more, double spaced. That's usually we call term paper, but I'll call it term paper, but with the less pages, because our English is not so fluent. I consider that to be the reality. So we can shorten it a little bit. Okay, and how such change may affect your own worship experience. That's like an application part. So if you read this book, one of the books, and then if it has changed your perspective, and then you're gonna say, okay, this is what I newly learned from this by reading the book, and then I'm going to apply this in my worship experience, whether it's going to be daily devotion or congregational worship or other forms of worship. It's application. So that's basically what I want you to do. 10, 15 pages, but for us, it will be 5 to 10 pages. Okay. Letter size, paper printed, and font size 10, and double space meeting the basic college report format. If you're not familiar with the basic college report format, you just Google like a college term paper, and it's gonna tell you what the standard or basic term paper should be like. Okay, so that will count 40 points total. Then attendance again. I assume that most of you are I-20 students, and you do have this valid I-20 visa, student visa, F1 visa from the government. If that's the case, we do not consider your watching video from distance. It doesn't count. Only the case that I allow you to watch the video and count it as attendance would be either you're sick or you have some emergencies that you have not planned. Okay, in those cases, I'll count you. I'll just let you watch the video, recorded version, and then just tell me, and I will just believe you that you have watched it, and then we'll count as attendance, and you are allowed to sign the attendance sheet either after or before. So that's the only case that I'll let you have that privilege. Otherwise, you are need to be present here and sign the attendance sheet personally yourself. No one can sign it for you. That won't work. And the total 10 classes attendance will give you automatic 60 points, grade points. Which means if you just add one more point, then you'll pass this class. Because my grading scale, 60 points and under, that's the F. So if you're gonna pass this class, at least you gotta write at least 1 page report plus full 10 class attendance. Then that will add you at least 5 points on your paper. That's grading scale. I want you to pass this class. I mean, you're paying a lot of money for each class, and I don't want you to fail or don't get the credit at all. So, okay. Then table of contents. These are things that we are going to cover during this 10-week class. And first, part 1, Foundation for Biblical Worship, will have 7 lessons. And it reads like each lesson. Let me just read it. Lesson 1, Worship as Human Nature. Lesson 2, Fundamentals of Christian Worship. And Lesson 3, Relevant Biblical Words and Terms. Because when you're discussing certain subject as an academic student, college level student, then there are always the very key terms and words that you need to define and understand. Then lesson 4, as we're going to be looking into the worship in the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament. And then lesson 5, worship as mandate and privilege. Lesson 6, theology and themes of biblical worship. So there we're going to deal with some theological issues. Then dimension in worship. I think thus far we'll try to cover this first, and I think we should be able to do that. Then second part 2, biblical worship in practice. So this is more like a practical practice part. And like I said, it is included, but our primary focus on this class is more of a theology and theoretical or biblical principle of worship. So if we have time, we'll go into the second part 2. 1, who and when, where of worship. Then 2, benefits and rewards in worship. And then 3, congregation worship and importance of the word in worship, meaning the Bible, importance of Bible or Bible teaching in worship. And lesson 5 will cover worship praise in songs and hymns, which I'm not an expert of. And lesson 6, beyond congregational worship, then which will cover your personal worship, and then worship beyond the church building. Okay. So then lesson 7 will cover hindrances to worship. So thus far is a very basic introduction to what we are going to do, and you have a pretty rough picture of what this class is going to be. If this is not what you expected from this so-called Christian worship, then you may reconsider your application or your registration, and that's fine. Okay. Then continuing with our real lesson. Okay, we'll just go ahead and begin our actual lesson. So it is Christian worship. The reason that we say Christian worship is because there, like Muslim worship or Buddhist worship or some other forms of worship. So worship is not exclusive to Christians. Everyone has their own religion, and then if you have a religion, then each and every religion have certain types or forms of worship. So part 1, foundation for biblical worship, and lesson 1, worship as human nature. So we begin by exploring why and how, basically why humans are worshiping as nature, as human nature. The answer is there. So I consider, and we consider, it's not me, but all the religious scholars, those who study religion, they say worship is a human nature. We are born with this nature to worship. Why people of all ages and all places are worshiping? Because it is true. It is true that if you travel the world, everywhere you go, you'd find people worshiping in very different forms and with a very different subject or objects of worship. And if you go back to in history and really old archaeological findings, you'll find 100% sure certain artifacts or the evidence for human worshiping. Go back to like so-called old people, Neanderthal people. We find the evidence of worship in their caves that they have lived. So, whether we call them primitive or early human, whatever you call it, as long as they are human, they do worship. That kind of divides between the animals and human being. So even if many so-called the anthropologists, they say only humans are very primitive, and then they are like in the edge of being an ape, between the ape and man. There's a clear distinction. The chimpanzees, gorillas, all these like a so-called subhuman kind of animals may use tools. They do. Some of them are very smart, and they use tools to survive. However, you'll find no evidence for any chimpanzees, gorillas, even though they are, living in a certain community with a certain social stratas and social orders and social regulations, which is pretty similar to human existence. Yet, you don't find any of these animals having the evidence of worship. They do not worship. So that very distinctive to human generation, the worship is. And again, any human being or human existence that had lived on earth, they do leave a certain trace for them worshiping. So it is there. This is an archaeological and anthropological statement. All the people on all the ages and all the cultures and all the places, they do or did worship. And it is true for even today's society. Those who are so-called atheists, if you're, using this worship or religion in very technical ways or in strict sense, they do worship. Atheists, they're worshiping atheism, which is not a subject, or the object, which is not an object, but it is a subject and it is an idea they are worshiping. So it is a worship in our definition of worship. So knowing that as a fact, Worship as a human nature. These are some of the reasons or list of reasons that we kind of see in human existence. Number one, all the people are religious. Whether you are within a so-called institutional religion or institutionalized religion or not, even as an individual and person, every person is religious. Religion meaning you are depending on something or someone to continue your existence as a person, as a human being. So dependency and being religious is the same word in anthropological sense. So in terms of religious being defined as an act of depending or continuing to serve a certain thing or a certain idea or a certain object, if that is the definition of being religious, every person indeed is religious. That's not the matter of choice, and it is inborn nature for a human being. So those who are called, I'm not religious, they are still religious in our definition, because those who are saying, I'm not religious, and then the sentence itself is start with I am, meaning I, being am, is the subject of worship. So this is a very fundamental idea about our approach on religion or worship, because even though you may not have any religious belief or a certain institutionalized belief, yet all the people do worship himself or herself. Even if the choice is not given, because the human nature as a human or as an animal, like some say, your instinct is saying you need to survive. So survival becomes the very idea that you are worshiping in our definition of worship. So thus, by trying to survive that instinct, that makes you religious in that sense. So some may say this is a too far extension of the definition of being religious, but that's how all the anthropologists would accept the word being religious. Other than practicing certain institutional religion, if we are in that case, of course you are religious even with the narrow terms or narrow definition of being religious. But for us anthropologists, we say religion is worship of a certain things, idea, or object, or even yourself. So that's how we define being religious. So we cannot deny every single human is religious. And then all, A-W-E, meaning all means all, right? When we face a certain things that is beyond our understanding or our imagination, or if you face something too big or too beautiful, and you are in awe. That's how English expresses. If you have been to the Grand Canyon, you lose. I mean, when you see that the canyon on the edge of Grand Canyon, you are without speech, because I mean it's too big, and it's not just big. You thinking. I mean, if you're just a normal person, you're thinking there gotta be something more, a lot powerful than I am, or people. You could say it's a nature. I mean, whatever you define it, people do have this awe. It's not a surprise. It's bigger than surprise. It's that feeling or state of being that you realize that you're just only a little something, like a dust. When you feel that, when you not only feel it, when you realize that, it is called awe. Look at the universe. There are billions and billions of stars. And some of the stars, they say, is a billion light years away. I mean, think of it. Traveling as fast as the light, which is, unimaginable, and it's going to take billion times billion years to reach that star. It's unimaginable. I mean, you cannot figure out how far that is. And there are the billions of stars up there. You see them. It's not imagination. It's not dream. It is actually there. So that is called awe. The stars, it's not that we see them. The people thousand years ago, they also looked at the sky and saw the stars. They didn't have knowledge that those stars are that much far away. They probably thought as you can probably reach them, but we now know that's way over there. And there are more stars than you are able to see in the sky. Of course, it is true. So that will bring you an awe. And proper and right attitude for us human being is there gotta be someone or something much bigger than us. Then third reason for people worshiping is because of our own limitation and weakness. We are limited. Not only you see beyond, you look into yourself, and we do find ourselves being so weak and vulnerable. Vulnerable, yes. So we are vulnerable to sin. We are vulnerable to, trying to deceive someone to save your own faith. That's called temptation. We are vulnerable to many different kinds of temptation, whether it's money or sex or something else. We are vulnerable, and we do fail. And including myself as a pastor, I'm vulnerable to fail. I do sin, still sin, and you're in the process of recovering, like those anonymous group, sit down alcoholics and drug addicts, and they just stand up and introduce themselves saying, I'm in the process of recovering from alcoholism or drug addiction and so on. So we are in the process of recovering. That doesn't mean that you're perfect. You still have that tendency and temptation. And so people are vulnerable. Whether you're in any culture, any age, doesn't matter. Which ethnic group that you belong to, doesn't matter. We are. All human generations are vulnerable. Because of that, a natural and automatic response from our the inside is that I need someone or something that is powerful and solid that I can depend on. It could be a person, it could be an idea, it could be a certain object, or it could have been spirit or God. So, and it also comes with the insecurity, of course. When you're weak and vulnerable, of course, you feel insecure. Fear. Human generation, from its beginning, we do have fear of something or someone. And also we have a fear of unknowns, which will bring you insecurity. Probably for the modern human generation who live in a very urban and technological society and culture, who we are, our fear is mostly about our future. We do not know what is going to happen tomorrow. In the old days, you usually are killed or you died from either hunger or natural disaster or sickness. Mostly probably 90% of people died from getting old and get sick. And you can get sick and when you're little and baby and young. So that's like a fear in the past, like 100 years ago. But now, some of those fear is gone because of a development technology and medicine and so on. Most of the fears that we had is gone. And for even natural disaster, there is something called forecast, and you know that the hurricane is coming, and then you can just leave where you're living and then avoid some of these natural disasters. But, for example, we are living in Southern California, and we are vulnerable to earthquakes. I went through the Northridge earthquake, and I was in Orange County, but it was shaking. It was pretty bad. I have never experienced your own bed jumping up and down. That's scary, right? And you don't know. The problem is you don't know when this is coming and how bad it is going to be. So we still have this fear of unknown, like a so-called earthquake, which you cannot predict and then prepare. So something that you cannot predict, something that you cannot prepare, you have fear. But still have a fear of death. And the very question is, when is it going to happen and how it's going to happen? The certainty is that we are going to die. Whether you die at the age of 60 or age of 120, doesn't matter. We do die. The problem is people do not know or do not have idea about what is going to happen after death. And people do have different assumptions about what is going to happen after your life ended on earth. And that would give you one of the primitive and primary yet fundamental fear about who you are, what is going to happen in the future. It could be near, it could be far, because you don't know when your death is going to come. So with those fear, people want to find out the answer or the remedy. Remedy meaning how to resolve those issues. All right, let's take a 10 minutes break. Okay, let us continue. We're continuing our discussion of human being being religious, and then having the natural, innate nature for worship. Guilt. Because we are not perfect, because we are vulnerable, because we are weak, every person does have this so-called moral, how should I say, moral paradox, sort of. You try to be good, and you know your conscience tells you that you're not good sometimes. Sometimes, not every time. Well, you try to reduce this bad behavior or so-called immoral, unethical conduct. But in spite of your desire, you still fall into so-called unethical, immoral sin, which will produce and result guilt. Guilt does not go away. You can tell yourself, just forget about it, everyone is the same, but that does not comfort you. And guilt needs to be resolved, and the only problem is that you cannot resolve or forget this feeling of guilt that follows you whenever you make a mistake, whenever you lie, or whenever you have bad feelings about someone. Then comes this guilt. So it is routine and daily thing, which means every individual, except those who are having the in the Bible it says your heart is blocked or dead. Unless your heart is dead, there are those who doesn't feel any guilt or conscience. There are those evil ones. Except those exceptions, human beings do have guilt, and you want to resolve it. And one way to resolve it would be having to have certain religion, or have a strong denial, like some people do. Yet, even when you're like having a strong denial, that sense of trying to deny the guilt, it becomes, in our definition, as a worship. So worship is not just the act of coming to a church or the temple or doing certain acts and rituals. That's a very narrow definition of worship. But our definition of worship in this class is whatever you are regarding or honoring or respecting, uplifting, or holding on to. That's again, holding on to is the subject of worship. So again, in that definition, if you follow that definition, addiction or your solid, strong motive, continual, true motive in your heart, that's worship. So that's how we define worship in this class. So when you say, I'm not guilty, that sense of defending yourself or trying to, avoid the guilt, that becomes worship itself. So worship is not just, act of coming into certain institution and room and having to have praise and listen to preaching and then doing certain ritual or communion. That's That's a part of worship, but our definition of worship is much broader than that. People do have so-called ultimate yearning. Ultimate yearning. It has to do with that ultimate loneliness. You guys are married. I am married. And as a person, you probably expect your marriage will eliminate your sense of loneliness. But paradoxically, when you get married, you have more deeper feeling of loneliness. Sometimes you felt left out, even though you are with your husband, your wife, and your children. Among that presence of those who are very close to you, still there's a very deep feeling of loneliness that you cannot deny. So whether you're married or not, whether you have a good friend or not, whether you have a best family or not, it doesn't matter. Any human being that you ask and you have a deep conversation with, I find not only myself but other people that I counseled do have this ultimate yearning, which brings us to trying to find the good word for this would be I think it's my phone. So the quest would be a very good word for our state of being or our response to this desire toward ultimate yearning. So we do have, as a person, as a human being, we know there's something that we are missing. There's no one teaching you that, but by nature, that we know we are missing something or someone. That's called ultimate yearning, and that will result you a quest. And people do find their own answers. And for us, fortunately and gracefully, that we found out that it is God, the Creator, that we are yearning for. And it's the proper answer. Not only is the best answer, it's proper answer. But there are those who do not find that to be the answer and try to worship something else or someone else other than God of Yahweh, the God, the Creator. So that's how we understand this term worship as we begin, our study on Christian worship. So ultimate loneliness is innate spirituality, also related to the same idea. Relational. We are built and designed in terms of so-called personal or interpersonal relation. When God said, let us make man and woman or man in our own image and in our likeness. In that very sentence, just one sentence, okay, look at that sentence, which is Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. There's our twice, let us. So us, our. That very declaration and sentence, it does indicate our God, it being three and three in one, the the fundamental elements, essence, or ethos of our God is that relationship, that interpersonal relationship. So when God created us, He did put us, put the element of ourness or we-ness. We-ness, being together, being people, or the being of relationship. That we-ness is the key, one of the key elements in when God says image. So image of God or God's image, when we say imago Dei in Latin, the image of God in Latin, when we say imago Dei, it does include this very we-ness. I think that would be the primary, like a holiness as the primary, the image of God. As much as holiness is, the we-ness would be the one of the major fundamental elements in the image of God. And we are built according to that design. So we are basically relational. When you are relational, you are trying to find that relationship. And people do find something else other than God. That's unfortunate. But for us, we do find God to be the proper, appropriate relationship that we are designed to. And then congregational people, or another word is communal. Communal is another word that we want to keep coming back to, because we, by nature, by design, we want to gather together. When you are gathering together, people do something. People are engaged into something. And that's an act of worship in our definition of worship. Whether you're coming together for the sports, for example, the sport is a form of worship, as an act of worship. You are entertaining yourself. The term entertainment is, in broader definition of worship, is an act of worship. So whether it's going to be one of your favorite the singer or favorite movie stars or sport character, I mean, if you're familiar with professional major baseball games, and if you're like a Dodgers fan, Ohtani is one of the figure that is being worshipped today. People say he's not human. He's beyond the human level. So I mean, you do have a certain person or figure that you are worshiping in terms of entertainment. All these things, because you gather together and you find someone else other than yourself who are doing exactly same thing, which is an act of worship on someone who happens to be either singer or movie stars or sports figure, whoever they are, that you are worshiping. Okay, for example, politics. Politics also, it includes the act of worship. Either it's a Trump or a Harris, doesn't matter. Whether you're Republican and Democratic, your ideology, it is an object or subject of worship. So when people gather together and find themselves with someone who has the same idea or same favorites or same respect for someone, then it becomes an act of worship. So it's automatic. You don't decide to do that, but it happens naturally. So that's within the human nature and humanity. Because of these reasons, people cannot avoid to worship. So it's a mandatory. I mean, you don't choose to or decide to, but it is in there. It's built in. You're born with. Also, it has to do with our basic needs. I mean, if you borrow some of the scientific or psychological analysis of human being, we have two examples. This I did tell you when we were doing like the world religion, when religion and the worship is the side of both coins, and there are two main characters that we can introduce. One is Maslow. He's famous for the pyramid of needs, starting from basic need to the self-esteem or self-realization on the top. So the ultimate that he does not mention here, on the top there is a self-actualization, and the bottom there's a very physical need. You need to eat, need to sleep, then need for safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. All these three areas can be, or it can become, the subject or themes of worship. When your needs are not met, and when your basic needs are not met, if you don't have enough to eat, the place to sleep, and if you don't have clothes to wear, then it becomes your primary need. And then primary need becomes the subject of worship. So when you are focusing on something that becomes the overriding or the fundamental theme of your existence, then it is this subject of worship. So I'm keep telling you our definition of worship, and it is not the act, it is within, in your mind, in your heart, and your spirit. Spirit is not there. Spirit. Okay. So spirit is your whole being. So Maslow said, excuse me. Maslow said that self-esteem or self-actualization would be the top of the list of the need. But on the top there's what we call spiritual need. He does not recognize spiritual need. Or spiritual need would include all these things, actually. So whichever the area is, it brings out the form of or act of the need of worship. Another example that which is not in my PowerPoint, but Sigmund Freud, one of the well-known the character or the figure in modern psychology. He interpreted human psychology from point of our physical and sexual needs. And here, I mean, the sexual needs are not mentioned here, but we could put it somewhere in the middle, like a belonging and love. But he did not expand that to the love and this, more beautiful and more, how did I say, more moderate or more decent need of love, but he focused more on the sexual need. And according to him, Sigmund Freud, the sexual need and desire can become the thing of worship. And he was so accurate and true, because in modern the 21st century, the media, the primary message of media is based on the Freud's analysis that human basically, even though they hide it, try to hide it, or try to beautify it, or try to decorate it, no matter what, underlying the human need, the primary need is a sexual desire. And then the media took that, and then 90% of the things that you see on today's TV or internet or YouTube does have that underlying assumption of Freud's theory. So they do find it, I mean, in their own terms, they would define the worship or subject worship as either basic human needs, or the pyramid of human needs, or the idea or ego in Freud's term. Usually in the especially organized religion, subject worship is something or someone who is higher than us, beyond our understanding or beyond our ability to understand. He or she or the thing should be stronger than us. So the nature, it is stronger than us. Look at the flood, tornado. All these things are still, even are, not were, is present, are the subject of worship. There are religion that worships tornado. There are religion that worships the best sea, ocean, or the big body of water. So because they are stronger and bigger. I mean, you find a religion that worshiping very big stone or mountain or tree. Wherever you go, there's this kind of religion. It's not an organized religion. It's so-called local religion or indigenous religion. And then that means it's been there like 1,000 years, as long as we remember. And that means people begin to worship from the beginning the stronger and bigger and higher things or the beings. So, I mean, is that same for Christianity? The answer is yes, because God is higher than us, He's stronger than us, He's bigger than us. True, right? No one think our God is smaller than us, or weaker, or less than us. If that's the case, we are not going to worship. Because usually people do not worship the flies or ants or these things, because they are not stronger than human beings. But they do worship bear, tiger, lion, because they're stronger.
And they worship frogs.
Yeah, some does.
Some people worship them.
Yeah, there are some religions that are worshiping the insects. I found that, and it's kind of funny. But usually they don't. And if you go to Japan, there are no Japanese here, but if we're in Japan, everywhere, every object becomes the subject of worship. So there's they are worshiping this golf ball. I found it very funny, but they are serious about it. I mean, very serious about worshiping that golf ball. So, it can be anything, but usually, when it comes to in terms of organized worship, religion, the subject of worship is higher. Same thing for Buddhism. Yes, they do honor and they believe that Buddha is a much better person than a regular normal person. And some Buddhist denominations do they did put this, myth of Buddha, and then the Buddha can heal, he can do like a revive a person, and so the Buddha has a very special power, like Jesus did. The thing is, actual Buddhist, the scripture does not record anything of the nature. It doesn't, show the miracles, but it does include some mysterious things that happened to Buddha and his disciples, but it's not like what Jesus did. But they do imply or add this power or stronger miracles to Buddha's story. And the reason they do that is because of this. There's a reason. Subject of worship continue. It's usually invincible, meaning you cannot defeat it. You cannot win against. So human being, we cannot win against the 100 miles per hour wind produced by the tornado. You cannot do anything about it. Just avoid it and try to be lucky. Incomprehensible. There are things in human existence that you cannot understand, period. You try everything possible and you cannot understand. Why do you think a good Christian young man dies suddenly because of a drunken driver? That's not comprehensible. Why would God allow that to happen to a very young Christian leader whose future is bright? These things happen in our lives. Recently, couple did one missionary, a Korean missionary in Kenya, and then his mother-in-law, who's visiting, were kidnapped. And then it's been almost a month. And there's no news of whether they are alive or not. When you hear that kind of news, and he's a missionary, he's been missionary for, he's actually second generation missionary. His father served in Kenya, and then he becomes a second generation missionary there. Served for the country and love the people, have a good, credit and good review from the people, and yet these things happen. So some of these things incomprehensible. Not only for the Christians, for example, non-believers. There are many things in this life, whether you're a believer or a non-believer, that is not, you cannot, understand that things happen. Okay. So when that happens, people try to find the answer to why. And the human resources do not give a very satisfactory answer. So when you do not find the answer among the human suggestions or human answers, then you look for something else beyond the human suggestions or human explanation, and then try to find that something or someone as our need for the worship. Desirable. Anything that is desirable, that becomes the subject of worship. Probably you will remember when you're dating your husband, your wife, you find her or him to be desirable. And there is a moment that you acknowledge, that you kind of see yourself and find that you are loving that person, the person that you're dating, more than your God, even though you're a Christian. So that moment is that you find that you cannot deny that you're worshiping that person. Once you get married, that no longer is the case. It's pretty sad, but that's the reality. And yet, a person can be desirable more than your God for us Christians, even as Christians. Non-Christians, in Korea we call 명품, which those luxury brand, right? Like a Gucci or Yves Saint Laurent, but all these names. Many women finds the bag from those famous brand to be the subject of worship. Becomes not only desirable, it comes to the level of worshiping. If you're doing like a so-called open run, meaning lining up for a certain product, limited edition, then certainly that is an act of worship. So the desirable person or thing can become the subject of worship. Now, concept and definition. So how are we going to define the term worship? Before we go into Christian, we want to define worship first. Number one, as innermost desire. Again, it has to do with your need and desire. This desire is the reason for your existence. So again, if I ask you, or you ask yourself, why am I trying to continue to live, and open your eyes this morning and do the things what you did? Is it just an automatic thing? It's a routine thing because it's routine? Even if it's a routine, and even if it's automatic, there's a deep reason behind it. You ask why to why and why, and there comes the moment that you cannot ask anymore why. So that's called innermost desire or the motive of your existence. And our job my job as a pastor, and your job as a Christian leader in your church, when you're discipling someone, when you're trying to help out someone to grow and mature as a believer, one of the most important things that you are to discern, meaning you're not trying to make a judgment call on someone, but you are to discern. That is a job of a leader. One thing that you want to discern is trying to find his or her utmost desire. Many times, most of the time is disguised. Disguised means it's hidden, or it's covered with, or it's kind of makeup, has a makeup on. It's disguised. And many leaders, Christian leaders, pastors, do not have ability or desire, or the agenda to look into that. People are very cunning. Cunning means we have, including myself, we have this natural ability to deceive someone, to protect you, or to secure yourself. That would be a good reason, but whatever the reason, that we are equipped with that ability to hide your innermost motive, sometimes even to yourself. So you are vulnerable to deceive yourself. That happens in life. God did not design that. It's not God's fault. He did not create us to be that way. But because of the fall, and because that we are under this existence of the evil, we do learn that technique, the nature. And the intention or desire or that technique to mask yourself and hide innermost desire, that is also an act of worship in our definition. So these things, trying to protect or disguise yourself, it is worshiping you. And people don't realize that you can worship yourself. And they usually try to deny, no, I don't worship myself. But in truth, all the people, 100%, I can say 100%, all the people have this tendency and desire to worship himself or herself. That's the most dangerous thing for a believer, Christian. Because they can disguise it, they can, manipulate it so people don't see it. But at the end, many Christians use the name of God or the Jesus Christ for their own benefit. To gain his or her own advantage, or to gain the fame, or to bring himself or herself to a certain position and place. See, this happens in the church very often, and we don't see that. So the thing is, many pastors, I'm a pastor, but many pastors do use this and try to hide or to justify his or her own desire to serve and worship himself or herself. So that's the most dangerous thing that can happen within a church or a Christian community. So this desire to worship, it is within our innermost motive. Second, emotional acts. Worship is an emotional expression of oneself. So the worship does include this emotional dimension when we try to define it. So we cannot exclude emotion, and sometimes emotion takes a large part of the act of worship. So some worship, especially the congregational worship, can become very emotional. And it is natural and it is appropriate, but if it goes to extreme, that's always the issue. You have a pendulum in a clock. Usually the old clock has a pendulum, goes way back and forth. That's called pendulum. And either end of pendulum is called extreme. And we don't fall into this trap of extreme. And the reason I'm saying that is some worshiping community, their form of worship is always emotional. And sometimes when it becomes extreme, it becomes the term we use. Fanatic. We want to avoid this. I mean, I don't agree with the fanatic forms of worship. I don't know if it is proper to name a certain group in this kind of class, because I mean this is going on YouTube, whether I like it or not. So someone can watch this and can be offended. So I would say there was a group called Vin something in Southern California, which began with Toronto. This movement, Vin something movement, they did not originally start with the so-called this kind of form of worship, but eventually it did become fanatic. And then there's an incident like a barking, which like a bark like a dog during the worship. It's not speaking in tongue. They actually produce sound of barking, just like sound like a dog barking.
As prayer?
Huh?
As prayer or what?
No, in the during the worship, they kind of they say when the Holy Spirit comes, and inspired by the Holy Spirit, you begin to bark, and then it's not human language, so that's kind of extreme. I personally don't agree that's a proper form or style of worship. Then dancing, yeah, I mean, because we do read that King David dancing and as a form of the worship. Okay, that we could, but barking, I have a big question there. So the emotional dimension, then intellectual dimension. We do have a very rational and intellectual dimension of worship. But this also can go to extreme. And some of the worship is so dry, so intellectual and rational, it becomes so dry. People are filled with the knowledge, but it doesn't come down to the heart. So that's another extreme. Many, not all, but many so-called liberal churches or liberal theology that has a liberal theology, they do become very intellectual. So it's like the college classroom. I mean, you feel this classroom is not emotional. There's nothing to be emotional, and it's very intellectual, and therefore it is dry. But no one can, say your class is too dry, because it's supposed to be. Ritual and function. So any organized worship or congregational or corporate worship does have an element of ritual and function. Even your personal worship, personal devotion has a certain function and certain ritual. For example, in Korea, we have so-called indigenous religion. And when we didn't have Christianity, and when we did have Buddhism, I mean, Buddhism was in Korea for almost 1,000+ years. So Buddhism was one of the basic, fundamental national or state religion for many years in Korea, many generations, and many dynasties even. And even with that, the formal official state religion, this local indigenous religion kept its tradition. And one of the things that you do is bring a clean water from the place they call sacred. It could be your own well or the community well, that you bring the water in the morning, early morning, before the sunrise, and then you put it on a table, and you kneel down, and you pray. The prayer should be usually this way. And then you keep this for 100 days. And after 100 days, they believe your prayer is going to be answered. So that's the practice, and it does have a certain ritual that comes with it. So you're supposed to bring a bowl of clean water in the morning, and it has to be the hour before the sun comes up, and it has to be every morning. You cannot skip, and you have to feel like 100 days. The reason it's 100 days has to do with the myth of the birth of Korea in ancient Korea. Like 5,000 years ago, there's the man that came down from the heaven, and he happens to be the son of the God, and then he married the man and the woman who kept herself, actually herself, right? And the bear was successful to keep herself in the cave for 100 days and come out to be a woman, the spouse of the supposed to be the son of God. And they married and bear a son, and his name is Tangun, who is the first the man who built Korea, ancient Korea. So, those stories still continues after 5,000 years in formal ritual. Okay. So we kind of want to stop here today, and we'll take a roll call, the attendance.